Hi, I'm Paula, creator of Dream Interpretation Coach. I talk about all things that have to do with dreams. Now, in this series, Dr. Barbara Condron, author, counselor, expert on dreams, interviews my husband Billy during a challenge we took to work up to 108 Om chantings in 108 days. Now, as we continue the Om practice, getting beyond the physicality of it, moving on into the realm of hearing the Om inside so that it becomes a mantra, we wondered, how would this affect dreaming? So here we are. Now, in the last episode, Billy had grandmas and swimming. But in part 14, we're going to discover what a dog named Skittles means in a dream. Let's get started.
Hi, Billy. We're at, I think, week 4 now into the challenge. And you had some interesting dreams. You have several dreams, but we're only going to choose 2 to focus on, which came on, we were just talking about this, on the 25th day of the challenge. And the theme of that day is resonance. And so we'll just kind of hold that over here in abeyance as to how it might have affected your dreaming that night. And we can start with dream 1 if you'd like. And
Sure.
yep.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right.
So the dream 1 of that morning starts out with me being at work at my part-time job at Lowe's, and I'm talking to a husband and wife who came in the shop, and they're looking for a bike rack. They wanted a different type than the one that was currently in their truck. And as I was helping them, we were walking by the front door. I looked out into the parking lot and I saw a truck with a bike, with a bike rack and bikes in the bed of the truck, and a bumper pull trailer behind the truck. And I confirmed that it was their truck and trailer and bikes that we were talking about in the parking lot. And they said, yes, it was. And I told them I thought that we had what they were looking for and to follow me. And that I also liked the bike rack that was in the back of their truck. And if they were interested in making a deal with me, I would be interested in buying that rack from them.
Okay.
So,
and that's the first part of that dream, right?
that's the first part.
It switches.
It drastically changes.
Yeah. So let's linger there for a moment. So let's get your take on it, how you look at it, what you see in it, and then we can maybe probe deeper for greater insight.
Well, we've talked about cycling before and how I do that quite a bit. So bikes in a dream mean maybe a little bit more to me than they do to others because I do it pretty much every day. But I've never had a dream that centered around bike racks. Okay. So that's stumping me a little bit. Now, from a practical standpoint, a bike rack is something that you would store a bike on. It would hold it and protect it while it's in travel. In this particular case, I mean, you have bike racks that you put in a garage or in front of a business or whatever, but the particular bike racks that we're talking about here are to protect that item while it's in transport on a car or a truck. In this case, a truck.
Right. So, that makes for intricate imagery to decipher, even in the language of mind. So the car, the vehicle, would be the physical body. And then it has a connection then with a tool that's used for movement that is completely dependent upon the consciousness of balance, which is your bike, anybody's bike. So right. Whereas your balance is not that important when you're driving a car at all. I mean, it really doesn't come into it. There are skills that come into driving a car, but you don't think of it in terms of balance, where if you lean while you're driving a car, it's not going to necessarily affect your driving at all, unless you also look somewhere else, then it could, so you don't have that occurring in that situation. So the fact that you got the car that has the bike rack is talking about it's a symbol that's very tight. I would say it's very tight. So it's zeroing in on your ability with your body to be balanced. So there's some way that perhaps from the breath work that you're doing with the Om challenge and what the Om itself does, that it's beginning to affect your physical body in regards to a commitment that you've made that you've been unconscious about. You mentioned that you're very much in your daily life. You cycle every day almost. So you're very committed to that. You're very conscious and awake about that. The dream is giving you back that the ways that is affecting your mobility and your physical body is a result, an unconscious result of the commitment to your, what most people would see as health plan or physical fitness program, which is you cycle every day. Yeah. The reality with the Om that I can see that's related is because the Om is not just making sound. That's how a lot of people who come into like Hatha yoga, particularly in the United States, and don't really have a teacher that understands the inner workings of it, then they think it's just pretty superficial. Not because there's anything lacking in them. There's just a knowledge and a depth and an experience wisdom that they don't have yet. So that's what the Om challenge cultivates, as you know, in the individual. So you're getting deeper and deeper into experiencing the Om on levels that bring wisdom. So that's part of how I would see this dilemma that the couple have come to you, universal mind, and you're in universal mind where all knowledge is, right? And and Om is very much universal knowledge.
Yeah. And then the husband and wife that I'm not familiar with being a commitment that is I'm not consciously familiar with.
Right. And the dream is bringing that to your attention. That, hey,
you've been committed all along. It's funny you mentioned Hatha yoga too, because starting just several weeks ago, I've started doing a lot more yoga. I've done some at home off and on, in front of the TV with instructors, but I'm doing live classes now, at least 2, and it's probably going to increase to at least 4 a week. I'm doing because it helps me with my balance.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
And mobility, So, okay.
And the other part of the stream was that you were willing to make a deal with them for that bike rack. Yes. So the bike rack, I would really see, you've had other dreams that we've covered already that have symbols that are speaking to you about your will. And the reality that the rack fits on the vehicle where it's stationary and it's secure. It's meant to secure the bike so that the bike becomes part of the vehicle, basically. So the rack itself, I think, is a symbol for will or focus.
So why are they wanting to get a new one and replace the one that they have, which looked like it was doing this job to me, and glancing out the window, the door, and seeing it? Why would they be interested in getting a different type?
The answers to that could be in the next part of the dream, because you had this is not the whole dream yet, right?
Right.
And then you also have another dream after this one, right?
Yes.
So you've got a continuing story there. So whatever the subconscious mind did not tell you that you're curious about may get answered later. We'll find out.
Right. So, and there is another unfamiliar husband and wife in the next dream.
Mm-hmm. So let's just leave that suspension, that curiosity in your conscious mind suspended over here, and it'll either get answered here in a moment, or we will talk about it at the end. Okay. All right. So then what happens?
Well, that's curious. Will Billy's question be answered? Let's find out.
Okay. All right. So then what happens?
So the next scene, this husband and wife are laying in a bed, and I'm sitting next to them on the edge of the bed, and we're talking.
Okay.
they had stayed overnight at a guest house on my property, which I do not have. I did have a guest house in my previous marriage on the property. And then what I'm about to tell next had to do also with my previous marriage. So stayed at a guest house on that property. And they had met my Australian cattle dog, Skittles was her name. And they loved her personality. And they were telling me how much they loved this dog's personality. And then I commenced to telling them the whole story about how I got her. Even the TV show that I'd looked at that had an ancestor of hers from the same bloodline on that show that was a really like a service dog. It did a lot of service work and made a lot of children, especially handicapped children, laugh and enjoy their time around this dog. And so that's what led me to want to, in real life, get a dog from the same bloodline. And I had cattle at the time too, so it made sense to get a dog that would actually help with that, which it did. And then I commenced to telling them the whole story, all the details about how I got the dog and the relationship I had with the dog. So would you like for me to go into that now, or you want to talk about?
Let's lay the setting for it, because what you said conveys the attitude that has to do with that couple, that, you know, this unconscious commitment that you have between your conscious and subconscious mind is now being given to you by the dream for your review and for you to become more consciously awake and alert about it. So there's some clues here in this second part of the dream. One being that there's the guest house that you actually did at one time own. So that part of the dream is letting you know, because it's an answer to where. You know, they're
Now, dream scripts, just like stories, answer all the W's: where, when, what, why. Now we're going to learn how to determine the where part of this dream, also known as the setting.
You know, they're key questions that every dream and dream scripts answers. One of them is where. So the where is going to tell you where your attention is focused in your everyday thinking, in your waking mind. So were you, the question that you ask yourself then is, what was your state of mind, your frame of mind the day before the dream? And this is
Now, if you have listened to any of my dream videos, you know the one thing I preach is to write down your dream in a dream journal. Add to that the history of what happened the days before the dream. Now, this is going to help you determine what this dream is trying to teach you. Because the main thing when you have a dream is not just to say, oh, I had a dream, but to figure out what your soul, your subconscious, is trying to give you a message about. And this is going to help you. Okay, I'll stop preaching.
And this is why, we endeavor to keep some notes about what happens a little bit during the day, and then the dream, and interpret it right away, right? Because that helps.
Right.
Because then you don't have to have this long memory, right? Because the dreams are the whole thing of interpreting your dream is to get really good, so that you're actually doing it as it happens. And then you have this wonderful rapport, marriage, that between your conscious and subconscious minds. So that comes back to why you're having these people that are married in these dreams that you don't know. I mean, you didn't know that you had those commitments.
Right.
And yet, so in one level, it's causing your intuition to surface for acknowledgement, for conscious acknowledgement. And particularly this one, because it brings back land that you owned and a guest house. So these two aspects of yourself, the commitment that you made, was temporary. It was temporary in ownership and you claiming it, and it was temporary in lodging, in the guest house idea of they really weren't like relatives, or they weren't even good friends. They were just guests. So the commitment that is tied to the flow of the dream is very simply related to something that you didn't give a whole lot of attention to at the time, but it obviously made a pretty big impact. And the big impact has to do with Skittles. So talk about Skittles now a little bit, and we'll see what that might be.
Okay, well, so just some bullet points about, the whole story about getting her is, like I mentioned earlier, I'd seen an ancestor of hers on TV show. I really liked the dog, the breed, the personality of that dog. And I did a little research online and found a breeder near Austin, north of Austin, that actually bred Australian cattle dogs, which in this case is a red heeler from that bloodline. So I purchased one of them, drove up to Austin, got it, was driving back to Houston, had the dog in the car with me. She actually crawled up on my shoulder on the way home and went to sleep all the way home, 3 hours, just slept on my shoulder. And we were that close, for the next couple of years. She was a very good companion to me. As a matter of fact, I mentioned the dream ends with me telling them that for the last year of my previous marriage, and I made a very distinct point to tell them that what I was about to say had to do with my previous marriage, not my current marriage, that this dog was my best friend. And that's where the dream ends.
What really impresses me from listening to it, you're telling me the life story of Skittles. It's like Skittles had a life story that was intimately integrated into yours in a prior marriage. You're calling it the previous marriage, but this was during the time when you were married to another woman that you're not married to now. So you have the husband and wife, and then you have this memory that is associated with the woman that you were married to at one time, owned property with at one time, had the dog with at one time. In other words, all of that is wrapped into that previous marriage, even to the point of you thinking that as the marriage unwound, then the dog was your best friend. Not a person, but the dog. And all the reasons why. Was it a she?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was your best friend, right? So, there's a lot, there's so much universal symbology there. Particularly in different cultures, but particularly in American culture, where people increasingly make their dogs, particularly their pets, their children. They treat them like their children. Sometimes they even feed them like their children. And, there's a place not far from where I live where there's an apartment, and part of what they're selling is that they have right next door, they have like kennels for the dogs of the tenants when the tenants might be absent or something like that. In other words, part of the rental deal is that they take care of the dogs when the people are gone for some reason. Yeah. I mean, that's the level of attachment and affection that we can have with our pets. So I'm saying this because I think that is key to why Skittles was all of a sudden in your dream, and why in your dream you went into great detail with this couple about that whole story of something that is no longer in your physical everyday reality, but it was very impressive and important to the commitment that you had consciously earlier in your life. So what my question then to you is, what about a few days ago, because it's when you had the dream, what about this particular part of your life, what's going on in your life, or the Om challenge, or whatever it fits into, is resonating with you becoming more consciously aware of commitment, your level of commitment, your kind of commitment that brings balance, that is linked to the habit that Skittles represented to you. Because the dog is a habit. It's a habitual way of thinking that I would think would tie back to the bikes and the rack, the focus that brings balance, because it's all the same dream.
Right. Hey, I've got a couple of ideas, but it gets pretty personal.
Okay, well, you don't have to. Privacy is everything. So you don't have to divulge that. You can just make that a mystery for everybody. We can all wonder, oh, I wonder what he's thinking, because
Right.
that is the nature of dreams. And that's where we'll leave that, because that is the nature. The dreams are so personal. They're so, this is something over and over and over for almost 50 years now, when I would introduce dream work with people. It is the most intimate action that any of us can take, is to share a dream. And so that's why in indigenous cultures who do honor dreams, it's respected, deeply respected. And we don't have that level of respect in our modern day culture. And we suffer for it.
Yeah.
So whenever we're in the presence of someone's dream, like a child's dream, when a child comes to you with a dream, then it's an adult's responsibility as a loving, compassionate companion, teacher, parent, to stop whatever you're doing and to receive that child and what he or she is telling you. And that just needs to be said, because we've reached that point with one of your dreams where we're not going to probe, certainly not publicly. We may talk about it later, but there are points of significance to dreaming, because nobody knows us better than our own subconscious mind. And
Right.
so, there is that level in your dream too, that, man's best friend is not a dog, it's your dreams. So Skittle
Right.
really does represent that.
Yeah, and see, and as far as my relationship with this dog, this was, I've always been kind to animals. I had a lot of animals during this period for over 10 years. My previous wife was in dog rescue for a particular breed. So we had a lot of dogs around all the time. And there was some that I got attached to. Yes, we had a Great Dane once that we had rescued. That was an awesome dog. And I cried when we had to put him down. We only had him for about 5 years. When he came to us, he was severely, affected by a disease that he had prior to us getting him. And but I never thought I would have a close relationship with an animal like this. It was a little out of character for me. I never treated the animals as children. I never got
Right.
to that as any of my children. So this was special.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So.
And one thing I've noticed with dogs particularly is that the relationship between the master and the dog is one of mastership, where the dog is expected to do what you want them to do. And so particularly the intimacy that happens between people and their pets is a kind of consciousness that the pet it's unconditional love, that the pet will love you no matter what. You can even be mean to the pet, but if you feed it, it will it will still stay with you, that kind of thing, which is a lower level, of course, of ownership of pets. However, it's true. It's true of the animal. And that's very different than what we run into with people. Our relationships with people are entirely different.
Well, when I left the marriage, I left the 70-acre ranch with 2 houses and a lot of property for this dog to run around on. I moved into an apartment, and I made a decision based on the dog's best interest and not mine to leave it where it was. Because there was no way I could coop up a dog like that, in an apartment in a crate, and take it out for a walk every evening. It's just, that would not work with a dog like that.
So was the dream in part conveying to you to become conscious of letting go of something that you loved?
Oh, it could be. Hmm. Yeah, it could be now that I think about that aspect of it. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and go into the second dream, and then it'll
Okay.
either answer that question or perhaps fit together some way. Yeah.
So the second dream.
Wow, that was fun and interesting and very insightful. We learned what it is to have a dog named Skittles in your dream, why Billy would have guests in his old guest house on property he doesn't even own any longer. That very same night, Billy had another dream where he was a stand in for a guru in a large auditorium where a scuffle turns into a vortex. Then Billy and Dr. Barber both make a commitment, so don't miss part 15.